Well, hello everybody and welcome to another video. Hope you're all having a great day. Hopefully I am a little clearer both visually and audibly thanks to my new camera and my new microphone. I don't have a book out, but at least I have all the gear. Just no idea, which I believe is the phrase. So without further ado, I thought this time I would touch on the creation of my hero. This is a chap called Fen, and he is a darkling. And Fen was born into a world of darkness ruled by the moon and the light of the moon, as I've explained in my previous videos, by Loon. And he's very much my kind of hero slash anti-hero. I like the idea of the sort of heroes versus villains and the grey bits in the middle. But I kind of also like the idea of very fallible heroes, very imperfect, potentially even people who start out well and have a sort of descent into darkness, or the other way around, and try and sort of clamber their way out. And Ven is very much one of the latter. He spent most of his childhood being tutored by his family, by his father Xenon, who perpetuates the life of darklings, power, conquest, war, things like that. Very selfish, very driven, loyal, but only if it serves a purpose. And as with all darklings, when they reach a certain age, it's accepted that people are born with the capability in the land of darkness to go either way. They're born with everything they could possibly need to lead a life of goodness and virtue and lean towards the light, or embrace the darkness and the consequences that come with that. And in a sense, that's the same for everybody, really, isn't it? We choose a path, and sometimes that path is influenced by our environment, sometimes it's nurture, sometimes it's influenced by friends, by family, by events that we go through, and that's kind of what sends us down one path or another. In the case of Fen and other darklings, those paths are predetermined, defined. You will go to a school of a warrior. You will go to school of magic, depending on your aptitude for these kinds of things. And I'll touch a little bit on magic shortly. But that's very much how it's all sort of laid out. And you kind of, that's it, and you have to show an aptitude in one of those, because otherwise you'll just end up being an outcast and banished to the wilds and be of no use to the family whatsoever. They won't hesitate to disown you if they don't think you're of any use anymore. So Fen, like all the others, they kind of got to the point where they are subjected to a physical environment that effectively turns them fully into a darkling. And what I mean by that is they grow up with a bit of a fight inside, where there is a certain light inside them, a want to be better. They look around as children and they think, well, is this right to kill? Is it right to selfishly look after what you want, not think about anyone else, only think about power, and only think about getting to the stage where you can one day rule and take over your family and conquer? And they struggle with that duality up to sort of adolescence. One of the things that people would rightly say is, well, in a land of darkness, how do they even see? What is it? Just torchlight? Okay, it's moonlight, but surely that's not going to grow anything. Surely that's not going to be enough to sustain people. Well, obviously that's partly where magic comes in, but also where I call upon the legend of how that world was born between the sun and the moon, the almighty battle that they had, the fact that Loon's sister Sol trapped him behind a mirror. She tricked him, plunged him into darkness, and his children, who were gods of emotion, tried to free him by shattering the mirror, but all they succeed in doing is cracking it. And when Sol saw this, she realized what a kind of mistake she'd made and said, well, okay, I will allow you to reflect my light down onto the world that you've created. And in return, I will invite you to share the sky for half of the day so that I can rest. And that's kind of how that was born. Well, of course, something had to happen to the shards of mirror after the gods struck it. And it's those shards, for want of a better phrase, that now exist in suspense above the world of Loon, the world of Umber. And those shards radiate light and energy that sustains the people beneath them. But it is also, they are also vessels into which Loon has poured his bitterness, his anger, his resentment towards the way he was treated by his sister. They're kind of vessels of evil, of hatred and darkness. So when a darkling reaches a certain age, they are taken inside one of these vessels, and all traces of purity, of light, of goodness are removed. An incredibly painful, violent process. Some don't even survive it. Fen did. But he came out changed in a different way to the others. He came out a fully fledged darkling, at least that's what they all thought. But such was the ferocity of the way he fought to protect the light that he felt inside him. A piece of it remained, and it remained into his adulthood, until he'd simply had enough of that life. He couldn't stand it any longer. The feuding, the bitterness, the rage, the violence, so much violence. And so he made a conscious choice one day that he just couldn't live with it anymore. Part of him wanted to explore this light that was inside him, explore what it was doing to him, explore what it meant, explore whether or not it was worth pursuing. So he decided to cross over into the land of light. Now, the easiest way I can describe what happens to darklings when they cross over to the land of light is basically vampiric. So the sunlight dissolves them. They simply cannot survive in the sunlight for very long. It is poison to them, especially once they have gone through the process inside the shard and kind of had that darkling essence ingrained into them. It's poison. So Fen stepped through, half wanting to explore what it was that made him shy away and turn away from his family and the darkling way of life, but also because he just thought, you know what, at this stage in my life, death would be a release from the torment. So he crossed over, and it was an incredibly painful experience, one of the most painful experiences of his entire life. And yet he survived. He survived when everyone else before him had been killed. But he awoke to find something was gone. The light that he'd been chasing, that he'd coveted in a way, that he'd been curious about, was gone. It literally felt as though someone had torn it from him. And yet he was drawn to the world that he now woke up in. He wanted to explore it. He wanted to integrate with it in a sense, immerse himself in it. and travel it, travel that world, encountering anyone and everyone, whether they liked it or not, to experience it. So that's kind of where we pick up with Fenn at the beginning of the book, and he's been on the side of light for nearly 20 years at that point. His skin is a little less grey and pallid, but his hair is still white. He still shies away from the sun. It's still difficult for him, to be in the sunlight after having grown up for half of his life in darkness. It's still very much feels alien to him in a certain sense. But of course, no sooner had he escaped than his father and their families sent everyone after him on a righteous hunt, if you like, to bring him back. Nobody leaves Xenon and his family and lives to tell the tale. So he was a traitor, betrayed them all, for nothing more than a whim which they felt, because surely nothing could compare to the majesty of being a darkling and living that life. And that's where we sort of pick up with him, basically, trying to survive, finding that as he continued to travel, he suddenly started to feel drawn to a certain part of the world, and he finds himself on a western peninsula on the continent where he's been traveling. This peninsula is rife with conflict, but overall an uneasy peace has reigned for for 100 years or so. They, like so many others, have been subjected to darkling attacks, which happened during the night. They would come through a glimpse, which is the cracks in the mirror, created portals which is what Fenn stepped through. They would come through, and that's what led to several dozen sort of darkling wars and the age of wars between the land of light and Umber. And they obviously wreaked havoc across the lands. And Fenn is obviously, people see him and they recognize him as a darkling straight away, and they're like, okay, this isn't good. They react pretty badly to him, some worse than others. And the story is very much about what happens when a small provincial town reacts to him in the worst way possible, and he becomes embroiled in something very sinister and quite big. So one of the things that has characterized his time on this side, in the land of light, as he's been traveling, was that at the same point that he stepped through and he survived, and he felt something was torn for him, something else took its place. And that was a dream, a very specific dream that he has every night, over and over. It doesn't last very long, but it's certainly vivid. And it's a dream of a ruined churchyard, a strange figure standing towards the altar at the dais, sunlight pouring in through what remains of the building, and ruins and wreckage everywhere, strange plants sprouting forth from the stone floors and the marble. He approaches the figure, and suddenly the sky is blackened and filled with a swarm of white moths, and they surround him, and then that's it. He wakes up. He doesn't know what it means. He doesn't know who the figure is. Doesn't know why he has them. But he needs to find out, and he needs to understand what it is. So when he reaches this town, a revelation becomes apparent that he needs to stay, partly for partly for survival, but also partly to try and gain answers to these dreams. And I won't continue anymore with spoilers. But suffice it to say, it's a fun character to write, and really enjoyed getting my teeth stuck into somebody who's very, very imperfect, who spends his life making one mistake after the other, who is constantly learning, very stubborn, a little egotistical, probably, a bit full of himself from time to time. Should have made this an autobiography, to be honest. Anyway, so yeah, Fen. He's a complex person, and he's going to need a lot of help. And that probably ends the video for now, because I've really enjoyed writing him, and as I think I hinted originally, that I actually had 5 books in me with Fen, and there's a lot more where that came from as well. So he's off to, I'd like to think, a good start in the first book, learning what it is to be better, learning a bit more about his dreams, learning how to be nice to people, because that's actually quite difficult for him, to be fair. So anyway, there we go. Thank you for your patience if you've made it all the way to the end of the video. I'm going to be covering a little bit more about some of the other characters. I'm going to be touching a little bit more on emotional magic in my next video, so stay tuned for that. Please like, share and subscribe the video. I'd like as many people as possible to get the opportunity to sort of get excited about this. As I think I said in my first video, if you're interested in becoming a beta reader, please do drop me an email and we can sort something out. Inquiries@duncanwritesfiction.com, and enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.